hearty welcome to one and all. This is episode 165 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel but haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you check out this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, turn on those notifications. So episode 165 will be the fifth entry in our new continuing series, Guilty Pleasure Movies. And today's movie is one that a lot of Gen Xers, particularly guys, will count among their favorite movie comedies, certainly favorite comedies of the 80s. And it's from the year before, Armed and Dangerous, which was one of the Guilty Pleasure movies. I believe this is a better film than Armed and Dangerous. It probably has more laughs. But either way, it's trash. I can admit that it's trash. It's not a good movie. But at the same time, it's fucking phenomenal. And it has moments that you look forward to every time you watch it, no matter how many times you've seen it. You look forward to certain moments and you're on the floor. You can't help it. It's one of those kinds of movies, a guilty pleasure movie. The movie is John Landis' 1985 comedy starring Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase, Spies Like Us. Now, younger people probably know Chevy Chase as the kind of cranky old guy on the TV show Community who had all kinds of problems getting along with his castmates. And it's unfortunate because as a younger person, he still had the same kind of issues. He had trouble getting along with people. He had issues with Bill Murray on Saturday Night Live. And there were plenty of people that always had his back and highly intelligent. I believe he went to MIT. But he had a lot of issues with people throughout his career. He didn't always get along with his castmates. There doesn't necessarily have to be a particular reason why. There are some people that, whether it's their process of how they work, or it's just that they're naturally a kind of a more aggressive or sort of a pricklier personality, what are you going to do? But as a film comic, not a stand-up comic, but somebody who made a lot of film comedies, he's one of the best as far as I'm concerned, even though he made a lot of really shitty movies. His ability to draw laughs out of situations that other actors would not be able to, his ability to ad-lib and find humor where there doesn't seem to be anything in a scene. You see it even in terrible movies. Another movie with Dan Aykroyd, Nothing But Trouble. It is atrocious, despite having Demi Moore in the cast, and Dan, and John Candy. It is horrendous. The only moments in the movie that work are when Chevy clearly goes off the script. He knows they're doomed, and he's going to do whatever he can to try to, wring blood out of a stone. Spies Like Us has Chevy in a sort of classic, smarter than everyone else, nonstop, smart alecky, wise ass, doesn't take anything seriously, tries to seduce his way to the top. He's basically a buffoon. He's a high IQ buffoon. And he plays like assistant to the press secretary, I guess in the Reagan administration, and he's okay at his job, but he doesn't want to do this. He wants to be a super spy. He wants to be a GLG-20, which would be the American equivalent of MI6, a James Bond kind of career path. That's what he wants. And on the other hand, you have Dan Aykroyd, who is also highly intelligent, not as personable, not as good with words, and he's a codebreaker. He is an old school codebreaker, figuring out encryption before anyone knew there was such a thing. He also wants to be a super spy. The two guys wouldn't seem to have much in common, and they really don't, other than that they both want to be spies. So they take this test, a kind of entrance exam, and Frank Oz, of all people, Miss Piggy Kermit the Frog himself, plays the proctor for the exam. And John Landis had used Frank Oz to humorous effect also in American Werewolf in London. He's the He's the American attaché from the embassy who comes to visit David Naughton's character, David Kessler, in a hospital after he's been attacked by a werewolf. And Frank Oz in that movie is sort of a humorous, antagonistic guy. He thinks the kid's full of shit and should be a little bit more grateful, I guess, that he's alive. His friend's dead. He's going to become a werewolf. How grateful is he supposed to be? Oh, that's right. There's no such thing as werewolves. So Frank Oz plays the same kind of character in this movie. He's a proctor for an exam. And Chevy, right away, you see, okay, this is for laughs. This movie is not going to be a serious spy thriller or even a comedic spy thriller. Chevy has this crazy outfit on. He's got an eye patch. He has what looks like a fake sling for a broken arm. He's got all kinds of gear on to take the test. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Now, Dan Aykroyd appears ready to take the test and to try to pass it. But Chevy immediately begins cheating off his seatmate, Dan Aykroyd. And needless to say, there's a funny moment. Chevy has a great exchange with Frank Oz where he tries to bribe him, then he pretends that he wasn't trying to bribe him. And it's nonstop giggles because it's so stupid. But the way this character is set up, this is what he would do. He figured if he had sex with a certain woman who kind of liked him, she would get him past the test where he wouldn't have to take it in the first place. And then he tries to get her to reconsider and jump him in the line by pretending that he's dying, and that doesn't work. It's like whatever he can do, he's going to try to do. Both guys seemingly get busted for cheating. And this is the sort of exam that is like big enough. I would think that they might see a little prison time. But no, they don't see any prison time. They're miraculously promoted. And they're trained as GLG 20s. Exactly what they wanted to do. And they're told by the powers that be, we like that you guys seem to be working as a team in there. Now, you're watching the movie for the first time. The bullshit meter is going off like crazy. They cheated. Well, sometimes you're going to have to, get your hands dirty, whatever. Something is definitely up. This doesn't make sense. And then the fact that they completely bombed the training, they're terrible at everything they're supposed to be able to do. They can't do any of it, but somehow they're thrown into the field. And while they're in the field, they hit a lot of great European locations. They're in the desert. They're in Kazakhstan, they're in Gibraltar, they're in Russia, they're bouncing around. And there is just a hysterical scene where Dan Aykroyd has to pretend to be a surgeon. And the reason why he's nominated to pretend to be a surgeon is he's good with his hands. He's good with his hands. So, yeah, sure, he should be able to take out this guy's appendix. Just give him the scalpel and he's good with his hands. He'll figure it out. Maybe he'll take out a kidney instead. Maybe he won't. But that's the mystery of life. During this scene of them preparing for surgery, they're in a tent and an elderly gentleman comes into the tent holding a golf club. And we realize it's Bob Hope. It's the Bob Hope. Now, Bob Hope made a lot of movies, I don't want to say in the ballpark of Spies Like Us, but he made movies where his character traveled to faraway lands. They were called the On the Road series. He often, with, I believe, Dorothy Lamour. So Bob Hope comes into the tent, and somehow he knows who they are. He looks at Dan Aykroyd and says, "Doctor." Looks at Chevy Chase, says, "Doctor." And then he almost turns to the camera and says, "Glad I'm not sick." And then he exits and presumably goes off to finish his round of golf, even though they're in the middle of fucking desert. What golf? The gag works because it's so preposterous. It can't be, but it is. It's Bob Hope. And the way that Dan and Chevy react to Bob Hope is incredible. Like, they know that's Bob Hope. That's not just an actor or Bob Hope playing a character. That's Bob Hope playing Bob Hope. So through crazy contortions of plot, they meet two other spies. Hence the title, Spies Like Us. Oh, you're GLG 20s? Yeah, you're spies like us. But it turns out that our intrepid heroes are fake. They're decoys. They're not real spies. That's why they got rushed through training. They weren't able to master any of the skills they would need in a real situation like this. And the two spies, one of whom is played by, at the time, Dan Aykroyd's real-life wife, Donna Dixon. She's terrific. The two spies are on a very serious mission to take apart a Russian nuke. And through the bumbling of Chevy Chase's, and what a great character name. His name is Emmett Fitz-Hume. And through Dan and Chevy's bumbling idiocy, and Dan's character is Austin Millbarge. I don't like that name as much. Donna Dixon's partner is killed. And so as much as the guys want to, we're in over our head here, we have no business being here, her partner's gone. Okay, you were supposed to be decoys, but we're all here. Let's finish this mission. Now, so they move forth, and they have one comedic encounter after another with a lot of what would normally be pretty fearsome bad guys. But Chevy, and this is not very believable, he's in situations where he should be literally scared out of his wits. And all he can do is wisecrack back and forth. And that's the kind of classic Gen X way. It's one reason why he was a star, is that he has that cool and that ability to just be flippant when people are being serious. Tell me why you're here in Russia. No. Well, for every question I ask, you don't tell me, I'll cut off a finger. Mine or yours. That's how he is. What are your objectives? Objectives? I object to taking a girl out. Buy her a nice dinner, she won't put out for you. Chevy's performance, it's easy to overlook just how funny he is in this film, even as we're aware of how preposterous his character is. The Aykroyd's character, Dan, is like, he's playing the straight man here. His character is more grounded in reality. He has normal reactions, except at the very end of the film, but we'll get to that. He has normal reactions. Chevy is very clearly playing to the audience. And the movie ended up being a pretty big box office hit. And I feel like John Landis, the filmmaker, gave Chevy free rein. It's okay for you to stretch. It's okay for you to every now and then signal to the audience that they're in on the joke. Because again, the fourth wall breaks and Bob Hope just randomly walking into a tent where there's no way that he could be there, but here he is. So the story pushes forth and Chevy's character gets kidnapped. And realistically, he's going to be executed, whether or not he tells them what he knows, which he doesn't really know that much. He's not a real spy, but they think he's just, that this is his cover, is that he pretends to be a fucking idiot when he's not really a fucking idiot. So Dan Aykroyd, actually, as Austin Millbarge, he rescues Chevy. And then the three principals get themselves together and they find their location of where the real spies, which was, it's funny, I don't remember. Oh, Boyer, that's right. Her last name is Boyer, the Donna Dixon character, the real spy, the one remaining real spy. So she's with them and they find their final location. Now, while this is going on, the U.S. military, I guess it's the U.S. military. It could be an offshoot. It could be kind of a renegade branch of the U.S. military. This part I'm not sure of, because there's a real life general played by a terrific old actor, Steve Forrest, and Bruce Davison, another actor I really like, is in the movie. And you have these people who are willing to apparently live underground. If what Chevy and Dan do is inadvertently trigger World War III, well, we'll just let it happen. We'll be fine down here. And eventually we'll crawl out and we'll repopulate the planet. I guess that's the plan. It's bonkers. It's batshit insane. I never really bought into that part of the story. The movie didn't really need that, the kind of ticking clock of doomsday. But it's not just doomsday. It's doomsday, but these assholes are going to let it happen, and they're just going to live underground until it's safe to come out after a nuclear winter or whatever. So when Chevy and Dan and Donna reach their final location, they're supposed to disarm this nuke, and they fuck it up. Or they're given the wrong instructions deliberately by the U.S. military, the renegades, maverick U.S. military faction. I guess they're considered the villains. They want it to happen. So Dan Aykroyd realizes, okay, we just launched a nuke against our own country. To think my fifth grade guidance counselor or my high school guidance counselor said I'd never amount to anything. Look what I just did here. So Aykroyd, who is clearly a math wizard, he calculates how long it would take for the U.S. radar cup to sense that we got an incoming nuke and we're pretty much all fucked here. How long is it going to take before it appears on radar? How long before our response? How long before the U.S. nukes reach us here in Russia? How long before Armageddon? And Dan says, I think we got 42 minutes until the end of civilization as we know it. And Chevy Chase, again, he's been flirting with, he's been all over Boyer, Donna Dixon's character. He's been all over her from the time they met. We know that he's not even concerned. He's so obsessed with her. So the world's going to end in 42 minutes. And that the Russians, who didn't know what was going on, they're standing there completely stunned. These stupid Americans, what are they going to kill us all? Like, what the fuck? Why would you do such a thing? Well, we didn't mean to. Thought we were helping. The world's about to end. The last bastions, or the only people on this side that know what's happening, they're just standing there shell-shocked. And Chevy looks at Donna and goes, want to go out with a bang? And for fans of Game of Thrones, I didn't really watch the show, but there's a kind of famous scene in one of the later seasons where Arya Stark is probably going to die. It's a big battle, and there's a reasonable chance she's going to die that day. She doesn't want to die a virgin. I think that's what it was. Game of Thrones is not funny. That's not a funny sequence on the show. But when I realized what she was doing, it's Chevy Chase and Donna Dixon. Want to go out with a bang? I beg your pardon. It's just an idea. Meantime, they're all going to be dead anyway, so as she says, under the circumstances, not such a bad idea. And the look on Chevy's face as he and Donna are walking away, presumably to have sex, there is not even the slightest bit of consternation that, yeah, we're all dead. I wonder if it's going to hurt when we get vaporized, or whether you just feel a little tingle and then darkness, or we're going to hell, or whatever. Nothing. He's just really excited. Yay. So Dan Aykroyd pairs off with kind of attractive young Russian, part of their crew. And while Aykroyd, and it was the actress Vanessa Angel, who was later in the Kingpin movie made by the Farrelly brothers with Woody Harrelson and Bill Murray, while he's laying there, he realizes that there is a way to reverse it. It's like Ghostbusters. We can reverse the particle flow. We'll cross the streams. This is this movie's version of we're going to cross the streams. Guidance, source programmable guidance. So Dan Aykroyd, using, I don't know what the fuck that is, but he reverses it and he figures out a way to recall the missiles and save the world. And because the world was on the precipice of destruction, now it seems that the Russians want to talk peace. The film climaxes with more celebrity cameos. A famous hard newsman by the name of Edwin Newman plays himself, and he's really funny. I don't even think he was trying to be funny, but he is hilarious. And so there's a scene with Chevy, because now he's a high-ranking diplomat, and Aykroyd is in there, and the negotiations are that they're playing the game of Risk. They're playing a board game to decide who keeps what land and who doesn't. It's kind of almost like a Dr. Strangelove kind of thing, where we imagine that there's all of these high-pressure back and forth, and we'll give you this if you give us that. And these people they're playing a board game for land and for, well, what can you do? You lose Eastern Europe. The film, not much of a spoiler, it does not end badly. It doesn't end with our heroes getting vaporized by a nuke. Despite the idiocy and how dumb the story is, conceptually, it's not stupid. It's not a bad idea. The idea, the concept of the U.S. or even a branch of the U.S. government using decoys to accomplish their own devious ends. Like that's pretty clever. That's cool. But you don't really think about that when you're watching the movie. You're thinking about the byplay of Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase. I mean, their chemistry is incredible. They're so good together. I wish they had made more movies. Dan Aykroyd a few years later made The Great Outdoors with John Candy, and that movie's okay. It should have been better. But Aykroyd was a guy who often, he's very easy to play off of. Like he and Eddie Murphy in the later scenes in Trading Places, Aykroyd really rises to the occasion because Eddie was so on fire in that movie. And Aykroyd knew he needed to do more. And he gave a broader performance than he, was noted for. And even in a movie like this, it's Chevy who gives the broad performance. He's reaching and striving and giving you everything he's got as the funny man, and Dan is playing the straight man. So the plot is, it has the shell of a good story, but it's really just an excuse for Chevy to make you laugh. And I feel like in this film, more than any other, if somebody asked me, what's a Chevy Chase movie for somebody that never saw one of his films when he was young and just, I thought he was good on Community, this is the movie I recommend. It, to me, is the most accessible. The first Fletch is very good. And I think the sequel it might be another guilty pleasure movie. But he made a lot of duds. He made a lot of movies that should have been better than they were. And he made films that were kind of interesting, like Deal of the Century, which was a William Friedkin film, which wasn't really a comedy. Memoirs of an Invisible Man should have been better. But this film, if you just want to laugh, you just want to shut your brain off and have fun for, an hour and 35 or an hour and 40 minutes, incredible, breathtaking locations, a really attractive cast, fun cameos, like I said, Bob Hope, Edwin Newman. Spies Like Us is super entertaining. And it's a movie that I can always watch. There's so many stupid but also memorable lines of dialogue. Chevy and Dan are during their training. They think they see something in the woods. What is that? It's a dick for. What's a dick for? To pee with. That level. But you know what? When you're 11 years old watching the movie, you start giggling. It's funny. It's stupid funny. And I argued in the Armed and Dangerous episode that Armed and Dangerous is the stupid funniest movie of the 80s. Spies Like Us is pretty close, but it's not quite as stupid. Spies Like Us has more serious elements. Armed and Dangerous is contained. It's not Armageddon. There's no Armageddon scenario. Maybe the main characters will buy it. Maybe they won't get to the bottom of the mystery, but no. Spies Like Us is a better movie than Armed and Dangerous. And it's just a ton of fun. And a lot of Gen Xers, as I say, will rank this among their favorite comedies. You fire it up whenever it's on. It's a kind of movie you want to share with people who haven't seen it. I wouldn't say that necessarily about Action Jackson or Hard to Kill, two of the other guilty pleasure movies. But Armed and Dangerous and especially Spies Like Us, are movies that if somebody says, hey, I'd like to watch kind of an 80s comedy, a lot of people say they were funnier back then, I might recommend Caddyshack. Caddyshack's okay, but there's a lot of chunks of that movie where you're following the kid, and it's not really that interesting. This film is funny. For me, it's funny the whole way through. There's not a single scene where there is not a laugh or a big laugh. The character reactions, Chevy's facial expressions, just priceless. And it's easy to see why he headlined movies for so many years. It didn't happen in a vacuum. It wasn't just because he knew people or he was really smart and knew what scripts to pick. He was really good. He knew how to hit his marks. His timing was impeccable. His line readings were impeccable. Even though there are people who thought, well, he kind of didn't really give much of a performance in Three Amigos. Technically, his character, I think, has the most screen time. They felt he could have done more in that movie. You know, Funny Farm's not that good. People love Christmas Vacation. It's okay. I think I prefer the original. But again, that's neither here nor there. Spies Like Us, super entertaining, stupid funny, but laugh out loud funny, and a film that has an enormous rewatchability, repeatability factor, right? I'm just going to see what streamer it's on, if it's free on anything. I don't think it is. I think you'd have to rent it, it might be a couple of bucks. $2 on Amazon Prime, but let me just double check for you, because every once in a while, you get lucky in some obscure app like Tubi. It had been on Tubi, but I don't think it's on Tubi right now. I think that, in order to see it, it either has to be airing. It could be airing on any number of channels, or you pay a couple of bucks and then you fire it up whenever you want. Number 5. Guilty Pleasure Movies, our continuing series. John Landis, 1985, classic trash. Fucking funny as fuck. Comedy, Spies Like Us, starring Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, Donna Dixon. This has been episode 165 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday evening with me here in New York. If you checked out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you check this out on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 166 real soon. Till then,